Major funding for Discovery Road brought to you in part by the Sangre de Cristo National Heritage Area, with additional funding from the National Park Service.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Discovery Road. I'm James Nelson. In this episode, how windmills, cheese, and wooden shoes made their way to America. And no, it was not an easy journey. We'll also find out how one family survived during the roughest of times. It's all part of the amazing, the incredible story of the Dutch in the state of Colorado. Across the ocean, you'll find paradise in America. That was the Clarion Call in the Netherlands. And so the SS Double Dam, stuffed with 508 passengers, Dutch flag whipping in the wind, knifed through the icy waters, with a service speed of 13.5 knots. The next leg, a long, arduous train ride. But imagine the anticipation. Dutch families chattering with excitement, children's noses pressed against the windows. Just weeks out from their homes in the Netherlands, hundreds of Dutch families looking for religious freedom, better jobs, their future. But after arriving to a warm welcome and a hot meal, the cold air slipped into their lives like a thief in the night.
The company that sponsored this kind of land grant company, it was called the Holland America Land and Immigration Society. And of course they promised the moon, said, oh, you've got water rights, you've got settlements, you've got everything. They had nothing.
Land agents had made very big promises. Colorado, the place, the best place. There was chatter about gold and silver in the mountains and a climate akin to Italy. It was all a ruse.
They had to pretty much start from scratch. And many of their neighbors where they moved into said, this land is unfarmable. And of course, the land company says, oh no, it's the most fertile land. You have 8 months of growing season here. Everything was a lie.
The big land deal fizzled. Money schemes surfaced. Most of the immigrants left. Only a handful stayed on. On his lawn in South Ogden, Utah, Bill Hersink is searching for something very important, his family story.
That's my grandfather, my father's father and mother. And the house in the background is their first house when they came to the San Luis Valley. It's still standing today.
Hersink's ancestors were among those who descended into the San Luis Valley in the 19th century. Hoodwinked by promises, promoters, and preachers.
Well, it was a strange and unfortunate circumstance where they were a big colony of people led to believe that this was, the ideal land for them to settle in, but it was radically different from the Netherlands where they'd come from.
It was much different than the Netherlands, and it was very dangerous, especially if people stayed.
And maybe the mistake was they came in the month of November when the temperatures start to go way down, and so there was just a lot of trauma, disease, death among children, and most everybody left except for my Hersink family ancestors.
Hersink and his wife, who also has Dutch roots in Colorado, embarking on a very important journey, hoping to find some answers to one of the most intriguing chronicles in the San Luis Valley.
Yeah, excited to go. Hey, see you later.
God, we're here as your people to talk about our heritage and how you have preserved this congregation in this place for your glory.
A small group of Dutch residents offer a word of prayer and then open up their journals, Bibles, and memory cards about how they got here and how they're doing today.
This is a picture of all the former ministers. This is Merle Bierma. This is Reverend Rylersdam. Reverend Klein-Dieters. And this one's my dad, Reverend Bernard Fisher.
Looking back, Barbara Terpstra didn't like the move from Iowa to Colorado, but it turned out to be the right call.
Yeah, I wasn't too happy. I was in the middle of my senior year. But God had a plan, so we moved here. The weather was a lot better than Iowa.
Part of the plan? Meeting her husband, Don. Ever since, they've been mainstays in the Dutch community.
My grandfather came from Netherlands.
Part of the Dutch story of survival in the San Luis Valley, their unwavering faith.
I have one daughter that was a baby when the new church was ready to open, and she was one of the first babies to be baptized here.
In this church?
In this church.
Well, one of the first babies, your daughter.
So that's part of the history. We went up there to have her baptized, but we sat in one of the front benches during the service.
With pride and dignity, the Dutch hold on to the artifacts of their past.
These Bibles were originally at the beginning of the church, decades before. We had the services in Dutch, so these are written in Dutch, and they were read in Dutch, and they were for decades they were used, and then as eventually services became more in English. This picture is one of the when the church was first here, when it was built, and before many of the houses are around it as they are now.
Carol Van Iwarden proudly embraces her heritage and her faith.
I'm a great-granddaughter of Adolf and Guada Hersink, who were the original Hersinks who stayed here. My grandfather was their oldest son. He was 11 years old when they came here.
This huge rock tucked into one corner of the churchyard came from the base of the Crestone Peak area up in the mountains. It's a big, strong, sturdy symbol of what the Christian Reformed Church is all about.
This rock came from Crestone, Colorado, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and that part of the range is a all conglomerate rock. This rock was chosen because it's a conglomeration of rocks, and that's how our church is seen. We see our church as a real conglomeration of people, of talents, of sizes, of importance, and so forth. And that's why that type of rock was chosen.
Do you remember that at all?
Wilbur and Ed Wieskamp looking over the old schoolhouse damaged by fire in recent years, but nonetheless filled with memories they still carry around.
We had a wood stove in here. This was the kitchen, and they'd serve all the people that would come for graduation or play or whatever. And but it's still pretty not intact, but The shelves, they're the same shelves that were there 100 years ago.
We got kidded a little bit by the neighbor kids, the ones that went to the community school, the rural school here. But it was all in fun. We never had any problems.
We were looked up to, you might say. We were never looked down on. And most all the parents that were in this community, they weren't wealthy, but they were hardworking and all made a living for their big families. Anton Hersink was down the road, and he had 16 children. He was married to Dorothy. Remember that at all? And he'd winch them things down and break them off, and then they cut them up. But at one time, this was a lot of trees in here. And George Van Ward, my uncle, drilled a pretty good-sized well right across from that. So he had flowing water out of that well. And he would flood a little pond out here. And we had a skating rink in the winter and a softball field in the summer. Remember, Ed? That's where I learned to skate. But my granddad, Adrian Van Ward, used to skate when he was in Holland. He had the old strap-on skates, and he'd have to skate down the canal on maybe 4 or 5 miles to go to school. But he learned to skate when he was a kid. Had strap-on steel skates. But just a lot of things that always stuck with me.
Years removed from the fun days of school and friends, and despite the empty, burned-out shells, the memories are lasting.
The county will probably come in here and make them tear it down, or the county will do it, because anytime something's an eyesore to an area, they finally make it destroy it.
And the memories, you're going to keep those anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We've got pictures, that were taken here.
Yeah.
When we're going to school here, so that helps
our
remind
memories.
us what the school looked like.
I always like to fix broken stuff, and the ones we were going to see outside, I rescued out of I call it the bone pile, because the engines were locked up, and I got them all up and running and in good shape again. So I thought maybe I could sell them, and I did sell a few.
There's a lot more to these old tractors than just old-fashioned rusting behemoths from yesterday's lifestyle. They're a metaphor, really, a reminder of farming the soil, making a go of it, hard work, and fixing whatever breaks down. Sturdy tractors means the family farm and community can keep going.
I know when we was going to high school, they say, "Oh, there's the Dutchman from the Waverly area again," and it kind of hurt, they was degrading us. But then after we got to know the kids and everybody, then we got along pretty good actually after that. So we had to end up ordering a new tank, because it keeps plugging my valve up over here. And still 6 volts. A lot of times I change it to 12 volt, but everything is good. The generator's good, so we're just leaving it original. Well, my grandfather came from the Netherlands, and had a pretty tough road to hoe when they got here, but they basically all survived, and families worked together more than they do today, because the neighbors and stuff would come over, because everybody had little M farm-alls and A John Deeres and 2 bottom plows. So if they want to get something done, 5 neighbors would go over and plow. And this is an M farm-all, a Super M. It's got the high compression pistons in it. It was locked up also. I found it in the bone pile. Yeah, it's been a fun hobby. Sometimes it can get a little expensive, so the wife gets it after me at some point. But I have sold some of them, so that makes her feel better too.
All right, this is where we had the sheep.
One of the first things we learned about this man was that he was proud of his heritage, and that starts with his name.
My name is Bob Hoff, B-O-B, of course, and then H-O-F. We just put one F on our last name. Everybody wants to put two F's on there, but that's the German spelling, and we're not German, we're Dutch. So the Dutch spelling has one F. Okay, I was born and raised here on this farm. My dad was born and raised here on this farm. My grandfather was farming this place. They never bought it. This is what you call school land. It's owned by the state, and no one ever bought this property, so it belongs to the state of Colorado. We used to milk cows over there in the north side. The open stall there that looks like a garage was a garage, and that's where Dad put the car. Over here we had a fence around this yard, and we used to lamb out ewes, and that's where we kept the lambs and ewes till they got big enough to go out to the pasture.
Long removed from his ancestors' early struggles, Hoff reflects on what the Dutch did in this area.
Our ancestors came to a place and it seemed like they just stayed there. Like I say, my grandpa had this place, my dad took it over from him, and we did get out of this farming business, all of us kids. There's none of us that are farming here anymore on this particular place.
But you're still here.
But we're still around here, yes.
This beautiful farm spread is the same soil that once challenged Rod Talsma's ancestors, but it's been tempered and tamed and harnessed over the years.
I'm the fourth generation of the original Hersink family that came here, and I'm farming land that they purchased way back then, and still been farming for right at 50 years now.
With hard work and more hard work, the place has become the family's good earth place, yielding alfalfa, small grains, barley, and oats.
The yields have been good this year, favorable weather, everything has worked out good, and I've got good market for oats. I've been raising oats for this guy in New Mexico for many years, and doing well with them.
This soil here is excellent for alfalfa and for our grains. Of course, it used to be that back in the day they did it for their animals.
Tell us why your story, your family story, the Dutch story is important.
Love our family, of course, but because they brought their heritage, their love for their country to another. A lot of it was because they needed to.
Seeds planted a long time ago by Dutch immigrants, including Tolsma's father at age 21, are still yielding and worth remembering.
And then when he came back, his folks says, no. But he says, no, I've already said goodbye and I'm going to America. So he came here by himself. They said there's wild people in America, and he thought, well, going to come here anyway. And I guess the first time he got off the boat in New York, some lady grabbed his hat and ran over running, and he thought, well, maybe there is truth in wild people here, but he never contacted his family or anything again.
What do you have to say about those that survived that first ugly chapter, so to speak, and thrived and left an imprint here that is still here today?
I would say their number one thing was their faith in God and their dedication to their family. They love the Lord, and establishing a church and strong family together, and that's number one.
Like farming?
Yeah. I mean, it's a way of life. Enjoy it.
This old warehouse is an unofficial monument to the Dutch families that were here a long time ago. We made an appointment with this man, Ted Hersink, to find out more about the stout structure that has withstood rough weather and the ravages of time. He opened the doors to the Dutch archives.
This building was built by my grandfather in 1937. He raised potatoes, and that's what he built it for. And he would store a lot of other neighbors' potatoes in here too. So that way they could keep everything separate. If they had separate strains of potatoes or a variety of potatoes, they could keep them separate.
The train whistle, though faint in his mind's eye, is still there. The hardships never lost.
His family came over. My grandfather was 5 years old, and they dropped him off at the railroad, outside of Alamosa, and they walked to the farm here. And the thing that they had to do first was to get their crops, things for their livestock and everything.
The thirsty San Luis Valley has always been in need of more water for the families and the crops.
You know, when they enticed our ancestors to come here, I think little did we know that the water situation was as in short supply as we did. We get 7 inches of rain during the summertime here. We rely on the Rio Grande River.
And when the river water was low and the riverbed dry, it was devastating. So Hersink's grandfather drilled wells. He knew water was down there somewhere.
The San Luis Valley's preeminence as an agricultural area is due primarily to its ample supplies of water. Water from the melting snows of the high Rockies and from numerous deep artesian wells.
This well is 1,760 feet deep.
Wow.
And it comes out of the ground about 70 degrees. And when they hit the right spot, you can see that flow. That is artesian. That's artesian flow.
It was indeed a turning point. Water, the lifeblood for everyone in the San Luis Valley.
It just turned the whole raising crops, whatever, and the crop that you raised. Potatoes, I mentioned that's another one that you have to carry on through the year. And if you run out of water, it doesn't matter if you have the crop in the ground, it's not going to be a success. And you run out of water, it's going to be a failure.
Water was the difference. They succeeded. Potatoes and other crops made it to the dinner table. And the old warehouse remained strong.
This is my grandfather's last tractor that he bought. In 1967, he decided he needed to upgrade the tractor. I was in high school when he bought it. Brand new tractor. I think that's the first brand new tractor he ever had. He was 82 years old when he bought it. And a year later, he died.
These murals in southern Colorado show the many people who have made the San Luis Valley their home. But the colors fade. Imagery becomes tattered. Memories often swept away with the winds of time. Holding on to the past is important, but never easy. The old timepiece, a gold watch that once belonged to his father, is Bill Hersink's way of keeping the family recital alive and ticking.
Yeah, this is the gold watch my dad had. He had a silver one that he wore every day, and this one was reserved for just Sundays.
Hersink is writing his family story, the Dutch story, from his perch in order to preserve an important chapter of American history.
It's the Hoff Ranch in the San Luis Valley. How they related to the rest of the environment, and that seems to me to be an important picture of the whole valley story, and as well as just the story of the Dutch there and my ancestry. If for no other reason, they're just fascinating, amazing kind of stories that I just don't think we want to forget. And I'm the last of my generation, and I want to make sure that There's something that follows and in a good readable form.
The Hersinks in the important corner of their home, showing a special window on the past. A butter churn from his mother's family, a hutch from his wife's Dutch family. Holding on to their family story forever.
I think preserving history and those stories is just a great part of the Dutch heritage and my family. But I also can see it as an important part of the whole settlement of the San Luis Valley.
From a disappointing disaster more than a century ago to the enduring story of those who stayed, this chapter of history only adds to the character and the contrast in the vast San Luis Valley and the marvelous story of Dutch people in America. I'm James Nelson. We'll see you next time out here on Discovery Road.